Hello, America. This is Call of Duty Goddess. Today is August the 25th, 2016. Well, there seems to be a bit of confusion here about what's going on in Syria. So let's see if we can weed through the propaganda and BS to try to figure out the truth. We'll go to RT first at a video clip from yesterday, the 24th.
Here at RTHQ this hour, and we're starting with that breaking news, bring up to speed on the latest we know. It's all about Turkey, and they've launched a military operation against Islamic State early this morning, just over its border in the Syrian town of Jarablus. These are the latest pictures we've got in to show you from a Turkish state-run news agency. It seems the operation began there with cross-border fire early this morning. There are reports that troops and tanks have been deployed. Currently no information, though, on whether they have crossed into Syria, although there is a line in from Damascus condemning Turkey's sending forces to Syrian territory. So we'll bring up speed more on that one. Local media say 70 ISIL targets have been hit in the first few hours of today's offensive. Turkish authorities say they've officially notified Russia about the operation and that US-backed coalition forces are also taking part in it. But that part's created some confusion. Let's try and cut through the confusion with Murad Gazdiev, who's joined us in the studio. Yeah, it's still a bit fluid about what's happening here. As we know it, as you know it, bring us up to speed, Murad.
Well, we know for a fact that they've been pounding Jarablus. We know that Turkish tanks have crossed the border as well, admittedly Turkish special forces. So at this point, it's hard to tell whether this is a Turkish backed invasion or a Turkish invasion backed by FSA rebels. More to the point, though, the president of Turkey, Erdogan, has had this to say.
This morning, our army started an operation against terrorist organizations like ISIL and the PYD in northern Syria, who have been threatening our country.
He said our army has begun an operation. Indeed, Turkish tanks, artillery, special forces, even apparently aircraft have moved into Syria, firing into Syria. And here we also have Syrian Kurds, because he said this isn't only aimed at ISIS, this is also aimed at Syrian Kurds, the YPG, the PYD, both organizations of Syrian Kurds that are, Turkey says, ideologically very similar to the PKK, which they consider terrorists. Now, this stretch of land is very important because if the if Turkish-backed FSA units, rebels, take this piece of the border, then they will deny Syrian Kurds this territory, which is very important in any future relations. And Washington is now in a very interesting position. You have Turkey, its NATO ally, pushing south into Syria. You have the Kurds, the YPG, now asking the United States to protect them from Turks, because we don't know who this operation will turn out to be aimed against, ISIS in the long term or Syrian Kurds. And in fact, we've previously asked the State Department about these differences within the coalition.
Is Turkey really an ally when they view America's partner forces on the ground, the YPG, the patches of which U.S. troops are wearing on their uniforms right now, as terrorists?
The goal here is to destroy and degrade Daesh and remove them from the battlefield. It's a goal we share with all members of the anti-Daesh coalition. Now, are there disagreements among members of the coalition as to how we proceed and with whom we're cooperating on the ground? I'm not going to say that there aren't. We're going to continue to work with the YPG as a part of the overarching Syrian Democratic Forces.
So there you go. There are differences, they say, but I would say those are much more than differences. You have two coalition partners, Kurds and Turks, who want to kill each other, simply speaking. Now there's a rat race. The rat race is on to prevent Syrian Kurds from taking more territory. The Turks are trying to do that. And Syrian Kurds, are now asking the United States for protection. So you can imagine how messy the situation is in those closed-door policy meetings in Washington, where they're trying to decide who to support, YPG Kurds, who have been fighting ISIS, or Turks, their NATO allies.
old to be a fly on the wall during those talks. What I would give. Anyway, so let's get a point of view from the Kurds. I'm at a Kurdish website, ANF News, titled, ISIS is an excuse, the target is the Kurds. Let's hear what they have to say. And I'm going to give you a fair warning. My pronunciations probably aren't very good, so forgive me ahead of time. Murat Karayılan stated that the target of the Turkish state's Jarablus operation is Rojava, and the operation could transform into a war between Kurdish people and the Turkish state. PKK Executive Committee member Murat Karayılan stated that Jarablus was handed over to Turkey-affiliated gangs as part of an agreement with ISIS, and the target of the operation was Rojava and the Syrian Democratic Forces. And to further expand on that, just quickly, handover from ISIS to ISIS through the Turkish Army in Jarablus. We have witnessed Jarablus being taken from ISIS gangs and handed over to shaved and dressed up ISIS gangs through the Turkish Army. So let's get back to the original article. Karayılan said that Europe would be affected by the aforementioned agreement the most because ISIS would be able to freely go into Europe via Istanbul. In an interview between the Kurdish news site and Jarablus, the following question and answer session took place. What is the actual goal of the operation, codenamed Euphrates Shield, and supported by the Turkish Army? The action is not an operation or a military movement. It is rather the result of an agreement between the AKP government and ISIS. ISIS evacuated the area between Jarablus and Azaz. So what is happening is an exchange rather than a military operation. The public is being manipulated into thinking that there was a great military operation and ISIS was forced to leave. These are lies. ISIS evacuated the area in advance as part of the aforementioned agreement. ISIS has never abandoned a town in one day without putting up a fight. If ISIS had resisted in Jarablus like it did in Manbij, they would not have been able to enter the town in even 2 months. So what is happening in Jarablus is an exchange, not an operation. Even exchange is not completely accurate because there's not much difference between ISIS and al-Nusra. As we saw in the past, al-Nusra members can join ISIS within a day. They do this transfer in groups, not individually. They just change their banners. In this sense, ISIS commanders left Jarablus in advance and local cadres joined al-Nusra. ISIS had taken Jarablus in a similar exchange. So there is not a conflict or war here, just an agreed upon exchange. The ISIS members are now in al-Nusra, and the known ISIS commanders withdrew to al-Bab. What is happening is an exchange rather than a military operation. The reports on clashes are manipulative lies. With this agreement, ISIS guaranteed its access to Europe and the rest of the world. The main problem of ISIS is to have access to the rest of the world so that its members can go to Europe, the Caucasus, and the rest of the world. ISIS and al-Nusra have always been intertwined. Al-Nusra will now control the Turkish border, and ISIS will be able to use the border anytime its members traveled through Istanbul. As part of this agreement, ISIS handed over the area from Jarablus to Rai to Turkey and FSA-affiliated groups. These groups are under the influence of al-Nusra. This is a dangerous agreement that will extend the lifespan of ISIS. ISIS had seen that it was difficult to defend the border with Turkey and realized that it could not stop the advance of SDF forces after the liberation of Manbij. This is why it agreed to this exchange. Turkey has always been actively involved in these dynamics and created the grounds for keeping the international channels of ISIS open in a secret manner. In this sense, the agreement causes grave dangers to Europe Europe and the rest of the world because of the threat of ISIS will not decrease. U.S. officials state they have accepted this frame you have mentioned. It is a mistake for the U.S. political ruling to accept and support this agreement. The U.S. officials, mainly the military, know very well that it will be difficult to weaken ISIS unless the Turkey-ISIS border is strictly closed. Now, in this way, the international channel and base of ISIS is kept open in a covered manner. From this perspective, it is a serious mistake which will harm Europe and Russia the most. The harms will come further to light in the coming period. ISIS is an excuse and the Kurds are the main target. Well, RT didn't do too bad of a job in calling that. They did analyze it a bit with the politics and things like that. They could have interviewed a Kurd, but, you know, that's okay. It's better than the American media is doing. So, let's look at this in a logical point of view. We've got Saudi Arabia here. ISIS starts out here. Move on up to Turkey. Get a little more training in there at their camps. And then they go right up through Istanbul into the Caucasus and the rest of the world. What a plan for the New World Order. I think the Kurds just exposed them. Isn't it odd that this Turkish coup that supposedly happened by supposedly the American forces and CIA, supposedly, it's all well and good now. If I were Turkey and the nation that was at my base staged a coup against me, I would never let them step foot on that ground. That'd be grounds for war. You see, that coup was fake, just like the Kurds called it, to crack down on the Kurds even more. Erdogan is so afraid the Kurds will have their own nation that he will do anything to stop them. And now I hope we haven't completely turned our backs on the Kurds. We'll see. But things are coming to light daily. And one of these days, hopefully really soon, I will get this Interlink timeline done. So you will be able to make your own decision about the coup, whether it was fake or not. But do you find it odd that we are still at that Air Force base after we supposedly staged that coup? I do. What's your thoughts on this? Did the Kurds call out the New World Order? Was the coup fake? This is Call of Duty Goddess signing off, and as always, I've got your 6.